Tonight on ABC News Live Prime, a decision in the case of the Menendez brothers. The Menendez brothers pleading for parole after more than 3 decades in prison. Matt Gutman is in San Diego where the brothers are being held. Bracing for Hurricane Erin, the sprawling storm batters the East Coast, bringing dangerous riptides and 20-foot waves. Roads washed out, cars stuck in the sand, and beaches closed, going into one of the last weekends of summer. We look at where the weather is going next. President Trump saying he'll lead the charge to eliminate mail-in ballots, contradicting last year's efforts by his own party to encourage the use of mail-in and early voting. How does he plan to push this through, and what would it mean for voters?
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Linsey Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Juju Chang in for Linsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin with a landmark day for the Menendez brothers. More than 35 years after murdering their parents in their Beverly Hills home, Lyle and Eric Menendez are getting their first chance at parole. Eric Menendez appearing before California's parole board today, pleading his case for why he should be released. His brother Lyle will have his turn tomorrow. And we are following Hurricane Erin, that Category 2 storm tearing along the East Coast, bringing life-threatening rip currents and wind gusts up to 100 miles an hour, what officials are saying about when the danger is expected to end. But first, in that historic case, here's ABC's chief national correspondent Matt Gutman outside the prison tonight. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Juju, I want to give you a state of play right now. There are expected to be 18 Menendez family members who will speak on the brothers' behalf, and this has so far been a marathon session taking well more than twice as long as most of these hearings. And from the get-go, the Menendez legal team has been concerned that his cell phone infractions, there have been multiple of them, will overshadow his decades of rehabilitation and almost unblemished conduct in that prison.
Tonight, a California parole board is deciding the fate of Eric Menendez, 36 years and a day after he and his brother Lyle shotgunned their parents to death in their Beverly Hills home. The now 54-year-old appearing via video link from this San Diego prison, making his case directly to the board, which must now decide whether his release poses an unreasonable risk of danger to society if released from prison. Just months ago, Eric told the judge that his actions during the murders were criminal, selfish, and cowardly. He offered no excuses, saying, "I fired all 5 rounds at my parents and went to reload." Eric and Lyle have always claimed that they were sexually abused by their father.
My dad had been molesting me.
And they claim they killed their parents because they feared for their lives when Eric threatened to expose the secret of their abuse. Their case dramatized in that Netflix series, Monsters.
This is done. This is done. You understand?
The Menendez family, voices for both the brothers and the victims, gets the final word today before the parole board. About a dozen family members expected to speak on the brothers' behalf. We spoke to them in April.
They are truly, deeply sorry for what they did. They are filled with remorse over what they did.
The family's matriarch, Kitty's sister Joan, and Jose's sister Terry say they've suffered long enough.
You've held your silence for 35 years?
It's a whole branch of my family erased. The ones that are gone and the ones that are still paying for it, which were kids.
The family tells ABC News tonight that the brothers have taken full accountability, saying they have built a meaningful life defined by purpose and service.
Now, Matt, we're still obviously waiting for a decision to come down. What exactly is the parole board weighing in on here?
I mean, it's a good question. I think primarily their major issue is whether the brothers, and specifically in this case today, Eric, tomorrow Lyle, would pose an unreasonable risk to the public if they are released. And so that's why they are very likely to focus on the issues of criminality and insight. Does Eric understand what he did wrong in those infractions, especially cell phones infractions? He's likely going to ask him, did you understand that that was essentially a criminal act you're committing, and would you do that on the outside as well? So pretty major issues, but on the whole, it should be noted that there's been almost no violence on either of the brothers' record. Eric had one violent act apparently over 20 years ago, Juju.
So let's say that Eric does get parole. We know he doesn't walk out the gate right away. What happens next, Matt?
No, not quite. It'll go to a larger board. Basically, the chief of the California Board of Parole would get to weigh in. He would have 5 months to weigh this case. And remember, this is extremely voluminous. We're talking about many thousands of pages of case documents here. He would go through that, and then it would be up to Gavin Newsom, who would have 30 days to weigh in. So at a minimum, it would be about 6 months before either of the brothers would be released if they are granted parole. And of course, the governor could decide at any moment to overturn it and deny the parole, or if he chooses, to grant the brothers clemency. Juju.
So many ifs in these twists and turns. Matt Gutman, we know you'll keep an eye on it. Thanks. So let's bring in attorney and ABC News contributor Bernardo Villalona. We know that today's hearing lasted hours longer, twice as long, he said, than expected. Catch us up on what could be next for Eric Menendez.
Yeah, so today is a very important hearing. You have to think that this is the first time ever that Eric Menendez even has the chance of appearing before a parole hearing, because you have to think that they were granted originally life without the possibility of parole. So this parole board has a very heavy decision to make, because how do you calculate whether a person poses an unreasonable risk of danger to the community? There's no scientific measure of doing that. However, a risk assessment was done on both of the brothers. And that risk assessment that was done determined that both of the brothers present a moderate risk, an unreasonable risk of harm to others if they were to be released. There's low, there's medium, there's high, and they presented a moderate one. So I think the parole board is going to weigh heavily on that, and also Governor Newsom, because remember, months prior, Governor Newsom wanted that risk, that evaluation to be done on these two brothers.
And so what are the implications? Because we know they were looking at infractions. What's the criteria that the parole board is looking at?
Yeah, so you got to think, when you're talking about infractions, you're talking about these brothers possibly breaking the rules inside of the jail, inside of the state prison, and these rules have to be followed. And one of the major infractions that Eric Menendez had is that he had a contraband with him. He had a cell phone. He could have been charged criminally with that. So that's a huge issue, because when the parole board is looking to see, will you commit a crime when you're if you were to release you, hey, you can't even follow the rules inside of the prison, so why should we take a chance and allow you to be released into the public?
And yet many are commenting that this is a pretty common infraction. What do we know about their behavior writ large while being incarcerated for all these decades?
So it's important to remember, Juju, that when they were sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, they saw no end in sight. So even knowing that they were going to die in prison, they still took actions in terms of bettering themselves, in terms of education, in terms of service within the prison, in terms of helping other inmates inside of the prison. In fact, some of the correction officers have even spoken up on their behalf. And all of that does also play a role in the determination by this parole board to see, have they changed? Have they become a new person? Are they rehabilitated in the sense that they've served their time and they deserve to be released into the public?
The so-called good behavior evaluation.
Behavior, yes.
Exactly. So let's switch gears back to the Sean Diddy Combs trial, which we know you covered every inch of, right?
Yes.
And we know that he's due to be sentenced on October 3rd,
yes,
right? And yet after he was convicted of those two charges related to prostitution, Combs has asked to be either acquitted or granted a new trial. What do you make of that?
Oh, that's a very common motion. There's nothing out of the ordinary. In fact, in every case, pretty much 99% of cases, even if a person is convicted of the lesser of the included offenses, meaning the lesser charge, the defense attorney still file a motion to have the verdict overturned or to be set aside or for a new trial to be granted. So it's fairly common, highly unlikely in this case that it will be granted, because there was enormous evidence of Mr. Combs engaging in soliciting prostitutes and bringing them across state lines. There were hotel records, payment records, there were text messages and testimony from Jane as well as from Cassie.
Once again, a common ruling. Bernardo Villalona, thank you as always for your insights. We're going to turn now to that Texas-sized showdown over redistricting, which is reaching its conclusion. Republicans there are set to officially redraw the maps, putting 5 more congressional seats in play. Now, other states like California are trying to follow suit. California just officially put the issue of redistricting back on the ballot there this fall. So what comes next in this redistricting tit for tat? Political director Avery Harper is here with more. Hey, Avery.
So, Juju, what we're seeing happen in Texas And what we're seeing happen in California is setting the stage for a battle over redistricting between red and blue states in places across the country. Of course, we know in Texas, they are trying to pick up as many as 5 congressional seats for Republicans in that state, and Democrats in California trying to do the same thing in California. The difference between California and Texas is the fact that in California, the decision over redistricting is going to have to go before voters there. But I will say the conversation that's being had about redistricting in places across the country is highly unusual. Typically, we only see states redistrict or redraw those congressional district lines after a census, so once a decade or after some sort of court order. That's not what we're seeing happen here. We're seeing all of these states talk about redistricting for political, partisan reasons, trying to juice the numbers ahead of the midterm year. And so in some of these Republican-led states, we're seeing in places like Missouri and Indiana, Ohio and Florida, we're seeing Republican governors and Republican lawmakers consider and weigh their options for redistricting in those states in favor of Republican lawmakers there. But we're also seeing in Democratic-led states, places like Illinois, like Maryland, and like New York, we're seeing the Democratic governors signal openness to redistricting in places like that. But there are constraints on some of these Democratic-led states. So in a place like here in New York, there is an independent commission that actually redraws those congressional lines. So it's highly unlikely that we will see New York able to redistrict ahead of midterms. And so we're definitely going to be watching what's happening here as we look at the analysis of states that are weighing their options in terms of redistricting. I'll tell you, elections experts tell us that there are more opportunities for Republicans to redistrict than there are opportunities for Democrats to successfully redistrict ahead of midterms. And so at least for right now, Juju, it seems that Republicans have the upper hand in this fight.
Okay, Avery Harper, thank you. For more now, we're going to be joined by California Democratic Representative Pete Aguilar, chair of the House Democratic Caucus. Thanks, Pete, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Juju.
Well, the GOP has moved to get those 5 extra seats in Texas. Do you think Democrats in your state can clear all the hurdles and, in essence, win back those 5 seats?
I do. I think that we have to. Our state legislature is undertaking that effort just today. Symbolically, this is incredibly important. Just as Texas takes 5 seats because Donald Trump says so, California will match that. And we will ask our voters to vote on a map. And that is the fundamental difference here, is California legislators are saying, here, this is what's happening. Texas is stealing 5 seats. Do you agree that we should match that? Do you agree we should fight fire with fire and make sure that Donald Trump and House Republicans can't make people disappear off of the streets and take your health care? Those are the decisions that the voters will have to make. As
Avery alluded to, New York voters, as well as the voters in your state, decided to have an independent commission in California. One of those independent members who drew California seats said, quote, "It brings me no joy to see the maps that we passed fairly by the commission to be tossed aside." And she said ultimately she did believe it as a necessary step, though. Do you have any second thoughts about Democrats in your state doing this?
I don't. And we see that there isn't just one commissioner. I believe it's up to 4 commissioners now who have served on independent redistricting efforts in 2011 and 2021 endorsing this plan because they agree. California has the gold standard when it comes to independent redistricting. We love it. We uplift it. I want it to be law in 50 states. And shame on us if we're going to let Texas engineer this political advantage just because Donald Trump says so. We can't do that. We need independent redistricting in 50 states. That's what we need. And we will work, House Democrats will work to make that a policy if we're given an opportunity to lead. But we can't just run off of the playing field and run away from this fight.
Is it disenfranchising voters in California just as they are being disenfranchised in Texas, arguably?
No, not at all. We fundamentally drew different maps. In Texas, they don't respect the Voting Rights Act. In Texas, they took Latino districts and chopped them in half. In California, we preserved the Voting Rights Act. In California, we left 11 districts untouched in this redraw. 70% of our population in California will have the same district that they're in under this map than they are today. The question before us was do we want to engage in this or let Texas run over us? And the answer was California standing strong.
And do you worry about fighting fire with fire? As our political director pointed out, Avery Harper, she said that political experts believe that Republicans have the upper hand. They have more opportunities to pick up seats in more states. Does that concern you?
Sure, but under that own analysis, if California didn't do anything, then we would wake up in January and be 13 seats negative from where we are today. Keep in mind, Republicans started this a couple years ago in North Carolina. They took 3 seats in their state house, just like they're doing in Texas today. And by the way, we're 3 seats down in the House of Representatives right now. It's not lost on any of us in the House Democratic Caucus that we're in the minority only because North Carolina redistricted mid-decade. That's unfortunate. And even under your own analysis, House Democrats would wake up 15, 16 votes short of the majority in January if we didn't take action. We have to take action. We have to do this. We can't control what every state does. Donald Trump is laying the groundwork. He's calling Missouri. He's calling Indiana. He's calling Florida. Just like he asked Brad Raffensperger to find 11,000 votes, he's asking them to find 1, 2, or 5 congressional districts in their state. It's unfair and it's wrong and it hurts people.
Representative Pete Aguilar, thank you so much, Congressman, for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we turn now to Hurricane Erin battering the East Coast, 700 miles wide with winds up to 100 miles an hour. Hurricane Erin is stirring up 20-foot waves and dangerous rip currents. The surf is running right through beachfront properties in North Carolina, where a state of emergency is in place. We'll have the track of this now Category 2 storm in a moment. But first, here's ABC's Morgan Norwood.
Hi, Juju. We're seeing powerful surge, flooded streets, and Erin's growing wrath up and down the East Coast, and it's not done yet.
Tonight, 20-foot waves turning life-threatening surf. Flooded roadways, the images still coming in as Hurricane Erin carves up the East Coast like a buzzsaw. In Hatteras, the dunes lining Highway 12 no match for Erin's relentless surge. The man shooting this video scrambling to safety as waves crash over, inundating that main route along the Outer Banks. The storm bashing the coast all night long, wind whipping on this pier in Nags Head as people come out to see the awesome power of the ocean. Erin seen here on satellite, massive, more than 700 miles across. And it's bringing massive swells along hundreds of miles of coastline. From Florida to New England. On New York's Long Island, waves up to 16 feet. Swimmers banned from all New York City beaches, but that didn't stop surfers from taking advantage of massive waves that look more like Hawaii than Rockaway Beach.
The surf's a lot bigger. The current's really strong. It's, very big swell. At least double triple the size that it normally is.
Our Ginger Z is on the Jersey Shore.
Here in Manasquan down the shore in New Jersey, the sea foam is kicking. We're getting sandblasted. The waves easily 8 to 10 feet. But by tonight, it will be even closer. The big bulldoze of water toward the shore. And that's why the concern for homes there without any dune in front of them.
New Jersey's governor declaring a state of emergency for all 21 counties.
And Morgan Norwood joins us now from the Rockaways along New York. Morgan, how are things looking there?
Well, Juju, I can tell you we're certainly starting to feel it. The winds, of course, are whipping, but the waves are the big story. The massive waves, you can see them crashing along the shore here, at times even hitting that lifeguard stand right behind me. And look, Juju, it's not over. We know as high tide approaches, these waves could grow, swell up to 16 feet. For perspective, that's as tall as a 2-story house. Of course, the beach is closed again today, but also tomorrow, Juju.
We know you'll keep an eye on it. Morgan Norwood, thank you. So let's get right to meteorologist Danny Beckstrom from our New York partner station, WBC. Danny, time this one out for us.
The northeast turn has started, Juju. Category 2 Hurricane Erin with max sustained wind 100 miles per hour is starting to pull away, but significant impacts are still expected up and down the East Coast. Right now, center is about 375 miles east-northeast of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. But this large hurricane is bringing widespread impacts. Tropical storm warnings remain in effect for the Outer Banks into coastal Virginia, and coastal flood alerts from the Carolinas to Maine, where several feet of inundation is possible during high tide. The wind helping to push that water on shore as gusts continue 30 to 45 miles per hour tonight from the Outer Banks to Cape Cod, contributing to the flood threat and coastal erosion. As the wind will relax as Erin pulls away, but this is such a large storm system that it will take days for the water itself to settle. High surf advisories posted up and down the East Coast for waves up to 20 feet on Friday, and in some cases into Saturday, especially in the Northeast. The risk for life-threatening rip currents continues from Florida to Maine, and while improving weather conditions will make people think it's a good beach day, it's so important to stress, Juju, how dangerous the water will be up the Northeast as we head into the weekend.
We hope everyone stays safe this weekend. Danny Breckstrom, thank you. And tonight, President Trump's effort to end the war in Ukraine has hit another setback. The president signaled a meeting between President Zelensky and Vladimir Putin could happen within a couple of weeks. But tonight, Russia is suggesting that meeting won't happen anytime soon. Here's Chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl.
Today, Russia all but ruled out a meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky anytime soon. This after the White House said Putin promised President Trump that the meeting would happen in a matter of weeks.
Did Putin promise to do a meeting with Zelensky, a direct meeting, in the coming weeks?
He has.
Overnight, Vice President J.D. Vance said a Zelensky-Putin meeting should take place even if there is no agreement on the terms of a peace deal.
I think the president's preference and my preference would be, let's have them meet regardless. We shouldn't say that they can't sit down until you've figured out every little detail. Sometimes them sitting down is what facilitates figuring out those details.
But hours after Vance said that, Russia flatly rejected the idea. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov saying the only way Putin would sit down with Zelensky is if, quote, all issues requiring consideration at the highest level are thoroughly worked out first. Lavrov suggests that would require a long process of lower-level meetings to hammer out the details. Meanwhile, Russia continues to bombard Ukraine, launching more than 600 drone and ballistic missile attacks in just the last 24 hours, according to the Ukrainian Air Force. Zelensky said today Moscow's strategy is clear. Quote, they are trying to wriggle out of the need to hold a meeting. They do not want to end this war. Today, President Trump was asked if a peace deal is still possible.
I would say within 2 weeks we're going to know one way or the other. And after that, we'll have to maybe take a different tack, but we'll see. But we'll know pretty soon.
And John Karl joins us now from the White House. John, the White House says that President Putin understood that any peace deal would include security guarantees for Ukraine. What are the Russians now saying about that?
The White House did say that, but the Russians are now saying that Russia would have to have a say in any such security guarantees for Ukraine. And Juju, this is an idea that is seen as, frankly, absurd because the whole point of the security guarantees is to protect Ukraine from another Russian invasion. So not an idea that seems to be moving forward fast, to say the least.
Closer to a non-starter, I would imagine. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Juju.
Contradictions from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tonight. In a video message, he said he has approved a plan to take over Gaza City. But he also added that he instructed negotiators to re-engage on ceasefire negotiations, including the release of all hostages held in Gaza. ABC News' Patrick Reevell joins us now. Patrick, Israel has begun an offensive on Gaza City. What's happening there, and how might it impact any potential negotiations?
Hi, Juju. Yeah, contradictory messages from Prime Minister Netanyahu today saying that he is re-engaging with ceasefire talks. But for now, Israel appears to be moving ahead with its offensive to occupy all of Gaza City. Palestinians are fleeing amid intense Israeli bombardments. Israel today ordered all hospitals in Gaza City to evacuate patients, and over 1 million people are in the path of Israel's offensive. The UN and other humanitarian organizations warning of horrific consequences. Tens of thousands of Palestinians are already, of course, facing starvation. Now, Netanyahu is facing pressure in Israel not to go ahead. Last weekend, 400,000 people, including hostage families, marched demanding that he accept a deal. Hamas on Monday then finally agreeing to a ceasefire proposal that Israel and the US had put forward earlier. That deal would free at least 10 hostages in exchange for a 60-day ceasefire. And Netanyahu today said he would begin immediate negotiations to release all the hostages and end the war on Israel's terms. That suggests he is not accepting the current deal. And this weekend, more big demonstrations are planned to pressure him. But for now, he's indicating that the offensive is going ahead.
We're hearing that Israel is now moving to divide the West Bank with a new settlement. What could that mean for Palestinians?
Yeah, Juju. Yesterday, Israel's government approved a new settlement plan that would effectively divide the West Bank and cut off East Jerusalem from the rest of the occupied territory. And the plan for the so-called E1 corridor has been frozen since 2009 because of international pressure. But Israeli ministers now are bluntly saying it's intended to prevent the creation of a Palestinian state. They say that it's a direct response to Western countries like Britain, France and Canada announcing that they will recognize a Palestinian state in September. Israel's far-right finance minister Smotrich saying the idea of a Palestinian state is being, quote, erased. Now, Britain and nearly 24 countries today condemning the move. The US ambassador to Israel, though, defending it. It will further inflame international anger, but Israel, for now, apparently defiant and moving ahead, Juju.
Patrick Reevell, thank you as always. And back here at home, a major legal win for President Trump tonight. A New York appeals court has thrown out the more than $500 million penalty in the state's fraud case against him. The court let the conviction stand, but called the penalty excessive. Trump is calling the ruling a total victory. It comes more than a year after he, his eldest sons, and his company were found liable for inflating the value of his real estate holdings. New York Attorney General Letitia James says she plans to appeal. Tonight, a disturbing discovery on a dairy farm in Colorado. Authorities responded to an emergency call, finding the bodies of 6 farm workers. Our Trevor Alt has the latest.
Tonight, authorities making a tragic discovery at a dairy farm in northern Colorado.
I'm on scene, unconscious victims approximately 12 feet down with possible high levels of H2S and unknown gases.
First responders arriving at the scene outside Boulder around 6 p.m. Wednesday for what they called a confined space rescue, instead finding the bodies of 6 workers.
You can go ahead and stand down the chopper.
It's not yet clear what exactly the victims were doing at the time of their deaths, but authorities are calling this a dairy accident. In a statement tonight, the Dairy Farmers of America says in part, "We are deeply saddened by this incident, and our thoughts and most sincere condolences go out to the friends and families of the deceased."
Juju, authorities say this was not a criminal incident, and OSHA is now investigating. Juju?
Trevor Alt, thank you. After months of tariff threats and negotiations, the U.S. and the European Union have reached a framework agreement on trade. Under the deal, the U.S. will impose a 15% tariff on imports of European pharmaceuticals, alcohol, and other products. The agreement also calls for the EU to eliminate tariffs on all American industrial exports. Both sides say the document is a first step that could expand to cover additional sectors. Rapper Lil Nas X was apparently arrested in Los Angeles after police responded to reports of a man walking around in his underwear on the street. When LAPD officers arrived, they arrested the Grammy-winning artist after he refused to comply with officers' commands. He is now hospitalized, and officials are working to determine whether the incident was related to drugs or a mental health crisis. Coming up here on Prime, thinking of visiting the White House? The indefinite suspension that could impact your plans. Plus, could the future of the mail-in ballot be at risk? The potential executive order that could revamp our country's election process. And it's a bird, it's a plane, it's your lunch. The popular fast food chain taking their delivery service to the skies. All this week in interviews, press conferences, and on social media, President Trump has been calling on Republicans to help him lead a movement to end mail-in voting. He has long rallied against the practice, saying it contributed to his loss in 2020, though no widespread fraud was ever found. With 2026 midterm elections around the corner, the president said Monday he plans to sign an executive order to get rid of mail-in ballots and voting machines. We'll discuss the legal issues surrounding the president's threats in a moment. But first, mail-in ballots and election security is tonight's By the Numbers. 28 states currently allow all voters to use mail-in ballots, according to the Brennan Center for Justice, and every state allows at least some voters to do so. And 8 states for now send mail-in ballots to every single eligible voter for each election. The president said this week he believes the U.S. was the only country in the world that allows voting by mail, but 34 countries or territories allow the practice, at least for some voters, according to Sweden's International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. An investigation by the Associated Press found fewer than 475 cases of voter fraud in 6 battleground states during the 2020 presidential election. Nonetheless, 147 GOP lawmakers voted to overturn those election results. Why not? And joining us now to discuss what the president and states could possibly do to limit mail-in voting and machine voting is Michael Waldman, president and CEO of the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU's School of Law. Thanks so much for joining us in studio.
And it's a great studio.
Thank you so much. So we said that tomorrow the president could sign this executive order and, he would disallow ballots to be mailed in future elections. What's the next step once that happens?
Well, if he really tries to do that, it will be legally challenged because he does not have the power to do that. The Constitution is very clear. States run elections. Congress has a role to set national standards. And under the law and the Constitution, presidents have no role, and certainly not the ability to sort of seize control of the machinery of elections. As your piece noted, vote by mail has been around a long time. 1 out of every 3 Americans votes that way. It's secure, and it would be actually a politically weird move because Republicans in the last election were very effective at encouraging their voters to vote that way. But this is part of a larger move that we see where President Trump and his administration, in a very much, I think, unprecedented way, are trying to intervene in the election to undermine confidence in advance.
And he's also saying that he's going to try to get Republican governors to go along to help block some of these mail-in measures. Is that a viable path?
Well, it's possible that you could see states try to pass laws doing that, although they've pulled back from that particular thing because so many voters like it. But that it is right that voting laws should be made by legislatures, not by presidential edict. And so much of this stuff is just things he does not have the power to do. It's an attempt, as he said, when he announced that he was going to try to do this executive order, he said, well, Vladimir Putin told me very proudly that you can't have honest elections unless you have mail-in voting, if you have mail-in voting. Now, I think it's kind of astonishing to cite Vladimir Putin as an expert on honest elections. But he also said that the states are merely, quote, agents for the president in counting the votes. Again, that's not what the Constitution says.
And clearly under the category of undermining confidence, mail-in voting has been a subject of a lot of disinformation and misinformation. How does that play into what this executive order might look like?
Well, so much of this, I suspect, is part of trying to sort of kick up dust and stir up doubts about the election, because it's going to be an important election. The midterm elections next year will determine who controls Congress and many, many other offices. And it could all be part of trying to undermine that public trust to make it easier to try to push people to overturn results. And we see a lot of other things the federal government is now doing along the same lines.
And give us a sense, we know that the Brennan Center documents how states implement election security. Describe some of those measures.
There's good news here. American elections are safe and secure, and think about it, they've had a lot of pressure. COVID, threats of violence, disinformation, but election officials from both parties really stepped up. They work with law enforcement, with police and others, and there are all different kinds of ways of checking to make sure that people really have the right to vote, that only citizens are on the rolls, that elections are secure, and in fact, when people have looked at the actual results, these myths vanish in the air.
And we know that local election officials take their jobs very seriously. Michael Waldman, thank you.
Thank you.
Author of Supermajority, a big fan. Thank you so much. Coming up, heart-pounding moments caught on surveillance cameras show a front-end loader barreling through an intersection, how it finally came to a stop. And sports lovers, it's the dawn of a new day. ABC News sits down with the chairman of ESPN to talk about all the changes coming to how we watch the sports we love. hailed as a game changer for sports fans, ESPN is launching its new direct-to-consumer streaming service and new features on an enhanced app, so you can see everything ESPN has to offer. The games, the shows, all in one place. Our own Will Reeves sat down with the chairman of ESPN, Jimmy Pitaro, to talk about it.
As sports fans' dream come true as ESPN launches their new streaming service.
Describe this new venture in 3 words. Does ESPN count as 1 word? Yes. Okay, all of ESPN. ESPN has always, since its inception in 1979, been on the cutting edge of sports and sports technology and the way that fans get access to sports. What does the launch of the app and the direct-to-consumer component mean for sports fans going forward? You'll finally be able to get all of ESPN all in one place. All of our content, all of our networks available direct to consumer for the first time in ESPN's history. So that's 12 networks, 47,000 live events. On top of live games, all of our studio programming, all of our original films, 30 for 30, E60, SC Featured, all of that will be available direct to consumer. Part 2 is we will be launching a significantly enhanced ESPN app. You'll see fantasy integration, betting integration, commerce integration.
At the heart of the new offerings, personalization for fans.
I'm a huge sports fan, huge. And these are things that I actually want as a sports fan. I think the best example of that is Sports Center for You. One of the things that I've always craved is a sports center that is tailored to me. So I'm Yankees, Giants, Knicks, Rangers, Notre Dame. When I fire up Sports Center in the morning, that's the content that I want first, and we're going to be able to deliver that to millions of sports fans. How do you tailor a TV show in that way? It's a great question. We have agreements with several of our talent. It's not possible to create a million different versions of SportsCenter manually. So it'll be the voices that you're accustomed to hearing on ESPN, but it'll be powered by AI.
Other ways you'll be able to personalize your experience? Watching 4 games at once, tracking fantasy teams in real time, and chances to shop or place bets while watching games.
And this one is picked off and going back the other way.
ESPN also exciting fans with big new announcements about the NFL as the start of football season approaches.
Tinsley, come on!
The news of the big agreement with the NFL has been making headlines. That's a game changer for ESPN and for the league and for fans. Yeah, it has been making headlines. Even my parents were aware. In fact, what is really exciting to me about that is our ability to include NFL Network in our ESPN direct-to-consumer offering. We'll launch with 12 networks as a part of ESPN direct-to-consumer. Once the deal closes, we will add a 13th network, which will be NFL Network. We will also be acquiring traditional linear rights to their very popular whip-around show called NFL Red Zone.
And the Lions have their hearts broken yet again.
We will be acquiring the Red Zone brand. So with that, we will have the opportunity to potentially expand Red Zone to other sports, other leagues. And then fantasy is a huge part of our business, NFL fantasy. And so our fantasy product will merge with their fantasy product, and we will become the official fantasy game of the NFL.
Incredible. Will Reeve, thank you. And if you are already a paid TV subscriber to ESPN, you don't have to change anything. All the new features are going to be available to you within the enhanced app as a paid TV subscriber. And of course, we should note that Disney is the parent company of both ABC and ESPN. And coming up here on Prime, the White House is shutting its doors to the public, why visitors are on the outs, and just how long tours will be off the table. And you won't believe your eyes. Magician, mentalist, and performing tricks right here on ABC News Live Prime. Don't miss our conversation with the amazing Aussie Wind. And we are just now confirming the late-breaking news we've been waiting for all day about Eric Menendez's fate. After marathon hours in front of a parole board in California, Eric Menendez was denied parole, and Matt Gutman is joining us from San Diego. Matt, what's the latest? How did they come to this decision?
They had to pour through a voluminous amount of case file, thousands of pages. Juju, that's even before today's marathon. 10-hour session lasted. It was just a short time ago that the parole board finished explaining why it came to this decision. So let me break that down very briefly. Basically, it was a 3-year denial, which means that Eric Menendez can appear before a parole board again within 3 years, but it'll probably be sooner than that, closer to 18 months. Here's why they came to this decision, despite the fact that Eric had an almost unblemished record in prison, exemplary conduct in prison, especially over the past 20 years. They talked about his pre-murder burglaries back in the late 80s, before the 1989 murders. He did it twice. They also talked about his multiple cell phone violation infractions that Eric had smuggled, or had cell phones smuggled into the prison. He paid $1,000 for one. He apparently took another from a prison guard, or bought one from a prison guard. And that, according to the parole board, showed a certain level of criminality. And finally, it was the shotgunning of Kitty Menendez, Eric and Lyle's mother. That is something that the parole board simply could not get beyond. They basically said she didn't have to die, and asked Eric point blank, "Why did you shoot her?" Eric said, "I thought that she was complicit. She had betrayed us, and I wish to this day that I hadn't done it." So a crushing defeat, really, for the Menendez brothers after they felt that they had come so close after being resentenced just a couple of months ago from life without the possibility of parole to 50 years to life, opening the possibility for parole, which, again, denied pretty vehemently from this parole board today, Juju.
And yet, Matt, you've reported extensively on the different avenues of appeal that the Menendez brothers have taken to the legal system. There is the matter of the clemency appeal with the governor. What are the other options available to them at this point?
This was the primary appeal, right? It was through resentencing. There is also clemency. The governor, Gavin Newsom, could decide at any point, it's at his discretion, that he believes that the Menendez brothers have served their time and should be released, recommending their parole. There's also a habeas petition, which is essentially saying that new information has come to light that the court needs to see. The new DA in Los Angeles, Nathan Hochman, has basically shut the habeas down. That is not a very likely path right now, and it's extremely unlikely that Governor Newsom is going to grant the brothers clemency after a parole board so roundly declined and denied their attempt at parole this time, pretty much excoriating the brother Eric Menendez's conduct in prison, and specifically his burglaries and the murder of his mother. There were some glowing statements. He did mention that the hospice work and Eric's conduct and creation of various programs, including a green space program in that prison behind me, was something that was commendable. But he found overall that this is not a person who is fit to be released. And again, the primary standard here is whether Eric poses an unreasonable risk to society if released. And of course, tomorrow, Lyle Menendez will be up. He doesn't have as many blemishes on his record, but he also doesn't have as an outstanding a record in prison as a model prisoner as Eric did. So that's up in the air as well. And again, Juju, we're more than 10 hours into this process today.
Matt Gutman, thank you as always for your attention to detail and all this reporting. I should tell you now that we're getting statements from the family of Eric and Lyle Menendez. They're saying that while we respect the decision, today's outcome was, of course, disappointing and not what we hoped for. Our belief in Eric remains unwavering, and we know that he will take the board's recommendation in stride. His remorse, growth, and the positive impact he's had on others speak for themselves. We'll continue to stand by him and hold hope that he'll be able to return soon. They also point to tomorrow's hearing with Lyle, who will also face the similar members of the California Parole Board. And for that, let's bring in attorney and ABC News contributor Bernarda Villalona. Bernarda, we were talking earlier about how the two brothers have very different appeals, and yet they clearly are in prison for the same murder.
Yes, so the parole board tomorrow, they're going to still determine whether he should be paroled. It should be considered separate and distinct from each other. Eric and Lyle are two different people. So tomorrow we may hear some of the same statements in regards to at least the victim. The family members give the same statement and the same request for him to be released, as well as the district attorney saying that they oppose any type of release. But still, you're also going to hear about who Lyle Menendez is in terms of what he's done while he's been in custody. Who is the person that he has become? Of course, what will remain the same in terms of both Eric and Lyle is the crime itself. You can't change the facts of what happened. Yes, dad was shot in the back of the head and mom was shot point blank in the face. And that was so gruesome.
And this decision did not surprise you?
No, it didn't surprise me at all. I wasn't surprised because when you're determining whether someone should be released into society, especially when you're talking about two murders. I used to be a homicide prosecutor, so I argued these parole hearings and wrote letters requesting that the parole board denied a person being released. You take into account the crime, like how gruesome it was. You take into account public safety. You take into account the victims and the victims' family. So while the family, yes, wanted them to be released, as the district attorney and also the parole board, they are representing the interests of the public. So while the victim's family may say, no, I forgive them and they should be released, they're talking about the broader good. They have to take into account the public safety.
And yet you know that the victim's family, in an unusual turn, is very supportive of their release and have been talking passionately. They testified for hours today in front of the parole board in California. How do you think that might affect the way their appeals go into the future? Because there is so much public appeal and public scrutiny on this particular case.
So, of course, in terms of tomorrow, we're going to see a lot of the same. But in terms of what's going to happen in the future, yes, the attorneys for both Eric and Lyle can appeal. And again, there's no decision for Lyle, but for Eric can appeal to the full board to determine whether there was an issue as to facts in terms of the hearings. But I don't see that there's going to be any change. Governor Newsom, yes, he can say, you know what, I reject the parole board's recommendation and I'm going to have them actually released. Highly unlikely, especially since we've seen a pattern of the past of people that have been serving sentences for homicides where Governor Newsom has rejected them being released despite the parole board recommending release. So you have seen that. But in terms of what will happen, what's left for them, they still have the habeas corpus where they're requesting a new trial. Highly unlikely that that will be granted. So I think the best bet now for Eric Menendez, hey, you have, let's say, 18 months. Live a squeaky clean life while in custody so this won't be used against you.
And this was a very determined outcome. Lyle Menendez, again, seeking the parole board's sympathies tomorrow. Bernardo Villalona, thank you, as always, for your insights. And, of course, that is our show for this hour. I'm Juju Chang. Please stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks for streaming with us.